All right, guys. So we talked about imperialism before we played the game on Thursday and Friday, obviously. And I want to review this real quick, talk about the Berlin Conference, and then just relate it to the game you guys just played. So it's all put in perspective there. Okay, like I mentioned, we do have our test tomorrow. So make sure you look at the study guide. Hopefully you got it done. And vocab terms that we have for this past chapter. Also, there's a booklet there. Okay, there's a booklet and a Quizlet attached to the study guide assignment. So please take advantage of it. It's the start of the third marking period. I know we're into it a little bit, but okay, these grades here are really going to impact you moving forward. So please look over the study guide. What is it again? What is the study guide? It's the what? What? It's the test, yes. So please look at it. I don't know what else to say. I don't know what else to say. All right. Yes. All right. Okay. So like I said, it's going to be a online test again, Google Form. So bring your iPad, charge, ready to go. I will have the QR code up, so you can access it in class again like you did. So you got to do tomorrow. What do I have to do that? Do I have to do that?
Monday, but then you said Tuesday. Then you're joking. So why it's saying you're.
I don't want to do that, but the reason I wanted to do today is because then it's turned in. So when I grade the test tomorrow, a lot of you just hey, you turn it in. That's why I had it today. But I guess I can make it tomorrow morning. Before the start of the first period. But it has to be in before you take the exam. Okay? It has to be in. Because if I'm grading it, I mean, if you don't have it in, I'm not going to go back. I'm kind of getting sick of that. We're in the third marking period now. We should all know. Does that mean you didn't do it? Does that mean you didn't do it? Yeah.
No, I just.
Oh, yeah.
I did it, but I didn't. Yes.
All right, just change the due dates for tomorrow morning then, before first. Okay, before first period. All right, so that being said, imperialism, what does it mean? We talked about imperialism already, quite a bit. So what does it mean? What does it mean? Go ahead, Chris. Thank you.
Basically, the country tries to use their economies and resources to try and get as much power and resources as possible.
Yeah, good job. Good job. All the European countries went through what type of stage? We talked about at the start of this chapter. What did they go through? It's another term that starts with an I. They're becoming more modern, more innovative. Go ahead, Connor. Industrial. Yeah, good job. So they went through this industrial waves. Okay, the first and second wave. Yeah, some countries in Europe were going through it progressively a little bit faster. We talked about Great Britain already and Germany. Yeah, United States is right there. We'll talk a little bit about that here shortly. But one thing to note with these countries, they're all innovating. They're all becoming more modern. And the way to try to have a competitive edge is to inspire these industrial stages within your country. And yeah, imperialism flows with that, right? militarism, we'll talk more about next chapter, to build up your military, which I kind of mentioned already here, especially with Germany. Right, these are all going to be leading factors and causes to World War One. That's what all these European countries were embracing at the time. Okay, so yeah, like Chris said, with imperialism, these European countries, right, they're pretty small, right? When you look up at the map, okay, Europe is pretty small compared to, let's say, Africa, let's say Asia, even the Western Hemisphere, North America, and South America. So these European countries are limited to what? Limited to what? What do they need to fuel their marketplace, fuel their economy? Land, resources, raw materials, right? So what better place here? Oh, it's untouched, Africa. Let's go to Africa. Okay, a lot of these areas have an abundance of resources, especially when it comes to fuel, coal, right? Oil, natural gas. It's going to be something big that these countries are going to utilize to fuel their industries, fuel their factories, right? Obviously, gold, diamonds, okay, and even materials with rubber. That's going to help with tires, obviously, these marketplaces that are going to boom, in the early 1900s. So yeah, territories, land, okay, raw materials. What else could they set up and establish in these areas, these territories within Africa, within Asia, that all? Yeah, okay, they can establish military bases, right? And that's going to expand their sphere of influence. Right? We talked already at the start of this chapter, Great Britain had an early lead. And that's where we mentioned what the quote, the sun never sets, for the British Empire. Okay, these other European countries, especially Germany at this time, are trying to catch up. And they're doing this in innovative ways and building up their military and just competing against one another. All right, so sooner or later, if these countries are all embracing these types of effects with industrialization, with militarism, with imperialism, sooner or later it's going to what? It's going to crack, right? Sooner or later it's going to be a conflict. All right, one way to try to keep the peace, though, in the late 1800s, we talked about it already, it was one of your terms. What was that conference that Otto von Bismarck led to try to bring these countries together to talk about the expansion down into Africa, controlling these territories, extracting resources from these territories? Go ahead, Chris. Yeah, the Berlin Conference. Yep, good job. So right now, I just want to talk about that real quick, and we'll jump right into the questions. So at the Berlin Conference, this was a meeting with all the European powers. They're coming together as they're embracing this imperialistic age, as they're industrialized, as they're building up their militaries. Bismarck especially realized, well, okay, this could lead to a huge war, a conflict that the world's really never seen. Okay, as these countries are becoming more modern, more innovative, as the weaponry is advancing at rates that is unbelievable for the time, he realizes that there needs to be a peaceful solution to it. That there needs to be a meeting that brings these European countries together to prevent warfare from happening. So here's a political cartoon. Like I said, I attached that to the title page of this module. And there's Bismarck there cutting up the pie, cutting up the cake of, I know Africa, but Africa. Right? That's literally what they did. Okay, it was really these territories were the highest bidder. Okay, and that's what you simulated with your game, the scramble for Africa. You guys were rolling the dice, acting like European countries, claiming territories, and depending on the number, it was a higher number or lower number. That depends on the one in that territory. Okay, let's say you got a 5. Let's say one of the territories was 5 points. Okay, what does that mean? What does that mean? This was number 1. Is that a lot? Yeah, good job, right? So definitely, right? When you look at resources, materials, how that's going to benefit your marketplace. Like I said, it could be gold, it could be diamonds, it could be fuel reserves, right? When it comes to mining this fuel out of the ground. And a lot of the African tribes, like I mentioned already, okay, the indigenous people there were forced as slaves in their own land, extracting these materials, extracting these raw materials from the earth, and to just benefit the European countries. And that's a term called social Darwinism. Okay, this was the survival of the fittest. And these European countries realize if they don't adapt, they don't accept these practices of advancement, then they're going to what? Probably fall behind, right? They're not going to be able to compete with these other European countries. All right, so I know we talked a little bit about the United States. So in the 1860s, what was the U.S. going through? Where they couldn't really propel themselves like Germany during this time when it comes to their innovation, when it comes to building up their industrial economy. Go ahead, Paul. The Civil War, right? So obviously that's a hindrance. That's a speed bump for them. Okay, but afterwards, after the Civil War, the United States went through a dramatic change. Okay, they quickly jumped on this imperialistic age as well. Try to catch up with these European countries. They do so in a different manner. They try to expand in the Caribbean Sea. They try to expand down into, I know, a little bit of South America. And they expand not over here in the Atlantic Ocean, because that's where all the thread is, right? All the thread is over here in Europe. They're going to expand out in the Pacific. Okay, so when you take American history too, you'll talk a little bit about the Spanish-American War, how the United States is trying to dominate, literally, the Western Hemisphere. Okay, we call it the Monroe Doctrine. You can try to eliminate the enemies from here, this part of the world, and chances are you won't have any wars, right? You won't have any conflicts. The United States is distant from Europe by the Atlantic Ocean. They're distant from Asia by the Pacific Ocean. So we have a way to try to isolate ourselves, but at the same time control those lands and make sure there's no outside influence there. All right, so anyway, with social Darwinism, it's just applying the evolutionary theory to what's going on with these European countries. You have to adapt, you have to evolve, you have to modernize in order to stay competitive, in order to stay at the top of the food chain. Okay, and that's what these European countries are doing. All right, is there any questions here? Berlin colonies. Again, imperialism, I know I gave the example, it's pretty self-explanatory, especially if you have a older sibling or even a younger sibling. If you want what they have, you're bigger, you're stronger, you can just take it from them, right? I'm not telling you to do that. I'm telling you to start fights at home. But with imperialism, that's a good way to relate it to what's going on here with the European countries and scramble for Africa. They knew that they're bigger, they're stronger, they have a stronger military. They can take what they want, and there's nothing the African tribes can do. All right, so real quick, let's go to the questions. We already answered one of them already. So summarize how the game you just played was a way that the European countries carved up Africa. Well, it's literally what we just talked about with early colonies. They all met together. These European countries. Otto von Bismarck led the way. Okay, and he was trying to peacefully solve a way to try to carve up Africa so that there won't be war, so that there won't be conflict. Okay, eventually we know World War I will happen, but for the short time, okay, this was a way to peacefully take this land over. One thing to note, though, the African tribes, do you think they saw any benefit out of this? No, not at all. Not at all. Like I mentioned, these tribes. Okay, they were the indigenous people there in Africa were forced as slaves in their own lands to extract resources to build these European countries up to what we know obviously today. Pretty wild stuff, wild stuff. All right, two, why do you think some African territories were worth more than others? We already mentioned this, Alana answered this. Okay, obviously, if it is a higher points, that means they have more resources, more materials. Also, if you think about it, it could mean that they are close to, let's say, a river. Close to a coastline, help with means of transportation, means of extracting more resources and sending them back to the main country. Obviously, you don't want to control land where the desert is, for France had some of their land, nothing there at all. So yeah, when you think about location too, that's important. So yeah, if you wanted to add raw materials, resources, and even just location when it comes to entering Africa, getting closer, establishing ports, and even establishing military bases, that's where these points kind of come from. All right, so last one here. What do you notice about the number of countries that remain neutral to the number of countries that remain neutral in your game? All right, so there's only 2 territories that remain neutral. And I'll show you a figure, show you a map here soon, what that looked like actually. What do we have? I think I asked you guys, but I'm lines. Let's start over here. Jason, what was yours? How many territories did you? Alana? 1? Okay. That's accurate, right? Who else? Who else? Nick? 2 or 3? Where's your packet? Austin? Bergen? How many territories do you have? 4. You lying me? All right, okay. Chris, you were with them, right? Okay. Connor? We had 1. 1, okay. Madagascar. Look at the island, Madagascar. Those penguins are fighting off. B? 3, okay, good. All right, so that's pretty accurate. You guys did a good job with that. Okay, here I'll show you a map really what it looked like. Okay, what European countries control what land in Africa. So beforehand, right before in 1850, this is where these European countries started to enter Africa. Yeah, obviously you see Great Britain up there. Okay, Great Britain is one of the countries that controlled and dominated a lot of the key places within territory and territories of Africa. They saw the use of transportation, especially up here, which we'll talk a little bit more about when it comes to the expansion of World War I. Suez Canal, they'll dig a canal right into here, connecting the Mediterranean down to the Red Sea to the Indian Ocean. So if you can control trade, you're going to make some money, right? Yeah, people are going to utilize that trade route because it's faster, right? It's a way to get to places a lot quicker. And with Great Britain controlling that, that's something important to know. When you get to American history too, the United States does something similar with Panama, the Panama Canal. I'm sure you maybe heard about that before. Van Halen, Panama. Yeah, oh, okay, never mind. All right, here we go. By 1914, this is what the continent of Africa looked like. So as you can see here, Great Britain controlled a lot of land along the Nile River, all the way down, entering internally, and extract the resources, send it back up. Oh, the Suez Canal. Transport those materials quick and easy. South Africa especially had something to note. I didn't get to mention it, but 4 wars was something big with Great Britain in its history as controlling these lands and again forcing the natives into what we know as enslavement, extracting resources and building up their economy. Right, France, like I said, France kind of got the shaft end of things, I guess you could say, because well, that's a desert. There's nothing really there. Okay, France was just showing at this time they weren't modernizing, they weren't innovating at the rates of Great Britain and Germany. Okay, and they're kind of left with what was left. All right, and with France, they didn't really have too much when it came to their control. Right, Russia. Where's Russia? Russia up there? No, they're not. So that's one thing to note too with Russia. They're falling behind when it comes to this growth, this industrial age. They're not just there with these other European countries yet. All right, like I mentioned, the independent, okay, we got Ethiopia, right, at the time wasn't called that. Ethiopia here, they actually fought off Italy, so that's something to know. And when we talk about Italy, when we get to World War II, they're going to send a lot of troops down there to control it because they're embarrassed, right? And then Liberia, right? Right. So those are the only 2 independent territories in Africa states. All right, so if you guys got to check out the presentation, okay, there's just more with it, with China, okay, India, obviously. This is known as the crown jewel for Great Britain. Okay, they controlled a lot of land. In India, English is one of the obviously top languages there. It's not the only one, but it is the main language in India because of this imperialistic age. Anything in China, controlled a lot of land here. They controlled Hong Kong all the way up until 1990. Right until the 1990s. So that's something to know. And then it obviously went to China then. But that's something to just express about this imperialistic age. And when you think about the languages all around the world, English is one of the number 1 languages in the world. Why? Because Great Britain controlled so much land so long ago. All right, so here are the other countries that controlled land throughout this time here. All right, here's a white man's burden. We already talked a little bit about this with one of the quotes. Okay, just expressing kind of the negative effects of imperialism, especially for the native tribesmen all around the world, not just in Africa, but in Asia as well, and how, these European countries and even America were dominating these soils and forcing these people to work as slaves in their own territories. All right, and then here's some political cartoons. You guys get to check it out. Okay, get time to look them over, just understand exactly what's going on with the control, the dominance of the time of these European countries. And here's a good one. How Great Britain controlled so much land all around the world. It's like an octopus. They have hands all over the place, right? All over these lands. Here's just another one, right? Just explaining how China was really up for the grabs of all these European countries because it's obviously large, has a huge population for forced slavery, and when it comes to extracting the resources. Right, here's another one. Great Britain, United States, as they're dominating lands all around the world, and obviously it has a little bit of a bad note there with that. Okay, here's another one. Uncle Sam, you have Great Britain, you have Germany, all being carried by their native tribes that they controlled all around the world. All right, So there you go. All right, so we'll play the review game real quick. That'll be good. That'll be good. Is there any questions on what we just talked about here, the Berlin Conference? You see how it relates? Okay, good. Good, good, good.